Lewis Award.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. It is my pleasure as a member of the Health Select Committee to speak at this first reading of the Home and Community Support Payment for Travel Between Clients Settlement Bill. And can I say to begin, ka pai e tū. E tū, as part of their membership, includes the Service and Food Workers Union, and it was the Service and Food Workers Union member Tamara Baddeley who, with the support of her union, and I want to acknowledge John Ryle, who filed a case against Healthcare of New Zealand. And to support the Service and Food Workers Union, we also had the PSA. So I want to acknowledge our unions who actually fight for the rights of our workers and highlight the inequalities in legislation. And in fact, this bill is a result of an inequality in the legislation, which was the Minimum Wage Act of 1983. And that's in fact what the legal opinion that then Human Rights Commissioner, the Equal Opportunity Commissioner, Judy McGregor, obtained. So she supported the Service and Food Workers Union, she supported the PSA. In addition to her support, she got Russell McVeigh to write a legal opinion which basically said that there was a legal argument that travel between clients constituted work under the Minimum Wage Act of 1983. Now that's incredibly symbolic because what it does is highlight that the people who work in the home and community-based care and support sector, and that's 28,000 New Zealand workers who work in the sector, who service over 40,000 New Zealanders. And we've heard today about who this particular care and support service sector provides services to. We're talking about older New Zealanders, we're talking about New Zealanders who have disabilities, we're talking about New Zealanders who choose to be cared for in their homes. And so we're talking about a vulnerable population that in fact is supported by vulnerable workers. And a lot of people have talked about the context of this legislation and the fact that the people involved in this piece of legislation aren't paid sufficiently. Well, hopefully, as other colleagues have alluded to in the debate this afternoon, this provides the impetus for the government to not only address the settlement that was reached between the government, the PSA, the Service and Food Workers Union in August last year, that was then ratified by those union members, but they also recognise and acknowledge that the people, the 28,000, particularly women who work in the sector, deserve actually a living wage. So we'll put that on the table today. They deserve a living wage. And they deserve a living wage because actually we shouldn't rely on the fact that they qualify because they're paid the minimum wage to care for people that we've talked about in the House today deserve to be serviced with the best quality support. Well, part of being serviced with the best quality support is making sure the workers who are undertaking those tasks are remunerated appropriately. So if we look at the progression of this piece of legislation, it was started in November 2012 when the Service and Food Workers Union, the PSA and Tamara Baddeley went to, the Employment Relations Authority and asked the Employment Relations Authority to refer the matter to the Employment Court. And so the progression from this issue being referred to the Employment Relations Authority then gave rise, I guess, to a period of negotiation. And so from November 2012, we came to April 2014, when the government decided in earnest that they wanted to negotiate with the Service and Food Workers Union and with the PSA. And what I want to note is that prior to that decision being made, actually the government's position was pretty clear. And I'll quote from Minister Tony Ryle at the time. He said that this matter between home care employers and home care employees was a matter for them to resolve. It had nothing to do with the government. It wasn't the government's responsibility. So it's good that we're in the House today and the government is taking responsibility for ensuring that our home and community-based care and support workers are actually compensated appropriately for getting between jobs. Because that's the context of their work. Actually, their car's their office. So I'm glad that the government changed their position and that they're actually now supporting the unions and what the unions are trying to achieve. And so from the negotiations which started in April 2014, they'd reached a resolution by August 2014. And I want to commend the leadership of the unions and also Judy McGregor at this time for standing up for the workers and then for presenting transparently that settlement to the workers, and the ratification of that settlement has enabled the bill that is before the House tonight. One of the interesting things that I've found in looking at this particular piece of legislation this afternoon is that actually they're having the same arguments over in Europe at the moment. So British trade unions have welcomed a ruling against a Spanish company, and they're saying that home care workers could see the benefits. So this particular article was published on the 10th of September 2015. And in the European Court, actually a Spanish trade union took a case against Tyco, which was a multinational fire and security company, which closed its network of regional offices in Spain in 2011. And the interesting thing about that, Mr. Speaker, is that the staff weren't paid to travel from their homes to install these security systems, and sometimes they had to travel for up to 3 hours away from their homes. And so the finding of the European Court, and I want to read the judgment, is that during, and I quote, "during the necessary travelling time, which generally cannot be shortened, the workers are therefore not able to use their time freely and pursue their own interests. The fact that the workers begin and finish the journeys at their homes stems directly from the decision of their employer to abolish the regional office and not from the desire of workers themselves." So kind of a different rationale, but actually it's the same logic. But of interest to me is that Dave Prentice, who's the General Secretary of the Unison Union in Britain, said that he thought the biggest impact of this ruling, Mr. Speaker, is going to be on home care workers. Tens of thousands of home care workers who are not even getting the minimum wage because their employers fail to pay them for the time they spend travelling between the homes of all the people they care for. So what I'm hoping from the legislation that we're enacting here today is actually workers around the world who are working in the care and support sector are going to be recognised for the contribution that they make to all of our societies, to care for those most vulnerable particularly. And so what I'm hoping is that this whole focus, and we've all been very clear about how supportive we are of the care workers because of the people that they're serving, older New Zealanders. We know through the demographics of our country that New Zealand's ageing. But what I'm hoping is the government does the next step and actually progressively increases the wages of this sector, that they don't continue to be the minimally paid workers in New Zealand. Because the value that we place on those workers is actually the value that we place on older New Zealanders. And I think that's the challenge not only for this government, but actually the Parliament in the future. So I see this as a beginning of appropriate compensation for our workers. And so what I'm hoping is that this isn't the end of the story, and the government hasn't done this just as a settlement because they were taken to court, but that actually they take this sector seriously and they remunerate the sector appropriately, and that we value their contribution to New Zealand society, and the way that we value it is by ensuring they're paid sufficiently. Kia ora.